Hello everyone. Today I will discuss the pressure enthalpy diagram, and I will discuss it in relation to your lab experiment that you perform normally in your thermodynamics labs for the refrigeration cycle. You obtain the data from a refrigeration cycle, and then using that data you need to plot the pressure enthalpy diagram. So before we have that data, because you obtained that data by performing the experiment, so we will trace the complete diagram using that data. But before that, we will understand what is a pressure enthalpy diagram and what information that we can find it from it. This is a very typical pressure enthalpy diagram in front of you. On the vertical axis you will see a pressure, and on the horizontal axis you will see enthalpy. Here you will have a region where we know this is saturated liquid line. Refrigerant, we know sometime it will be liquid, sometime it will be vapor, sometime it will be mixed region. So it is a saturated liquid line boundary, saturated vapor line boundary, and between them you will have a saturated liquid plus vapor. Other than pressure enthalpy, you can have another information on this diagram. For example, isentropic lines, those are drawn like that. Then you can also find the information of isothermal lines for corresponding to different temperatures. Additionally, you can also find the information of density, or which is also called specific volume, from the pressure enthalpy diagram. So this is a very general introduction to a pressure enthalpy diagram. Now let's move to a particular problem to trace a diagram. In order to trace that diagram, here I will just, let's make a zoom. We have a experimental data. For your experimental data, I just place that I obtained from the lab here. The important information that might be we need, I will just you can say highlight here. We need a evaporator pressure, and we know that evaporator pressure might be, it is here which we need, it is 0.362 bar, it is absolute pressure. Other than evaporator, I need condenser pressure to trace it, which is 1.607 bar. It is again given here. We also need some other information. For example, what is the evaporator refrigerant temperature. We can find it is also, we have obtained the reading from the experiment. Refrigerant temperature, we know that from refrigerant, then it enters into the compressor. Then we also need to know the compressor discharge temperature, which is given at 66.6 centigrade Celsius. And finally, the other information that will help us to trace the diagram, it will be throttle inlet temperature, which is here 36.45. Now let's move to the diagram using this information, particular information, to trace a pressure enthalpy diagram for the experiment. So first we need to trace the lines. Horizontal lines correspond to evaporator pressure, which is here, and the condenser pressure. So let's move to the diagram 0.36. So this is my typical pressure enthalpy diagram. I will, you can first trace these lines. 0.362, if you look on the vertical axis, might be you can find 0.36 somewhere around here. Remember that it's a logarithmic scale, and you will approximately select a line. For example, I have selected a line, approximately 0.362, and might be it is somewhere around here. So trace a horizontal line corresponding to pressure 0.362. Just extend it normally. Then another pressure which is given to us, it is condenser pressure, and we know that condenser pressure is given 1.607. So might be 1.6, it is somewhere around here. So again trace a horizontal line corresponding to this particular pressure. So this pressure line is belongs to condenser. So let's name them. For example, evaporator here, evaporator pressure, and this particular line upper is condenser pressure. So now we have traced two lines corresponding to evaporator pressure and condenser pressure. Remember that this data we obtained from the experiment that is performed in the lab for refrigeration cycle. Now another important informations from the data that we obtained is the temperature values. For example, for the evaporator pressure, evaporator refrigerant temperature, it is 12 degree. It is given to us. We found it from the experiment. So let's trace this point. As you can see here, isothermal lines mean constant temperature lines. For example, this line, 10 degree isothermal line, it is moving upward like that, and again this is 20 degree isothermal line which is moving upward like that. But our desired temperature is 12, which should be very close to 10. So I will just trace that point here, somewhere here, which is almost you can say close to the 12 degree. So now I know the evaporator temperature. The other thing I need to know, we know from the evaporator the refrigerant will enter into the compressor. So what is compressor outlet temperature provided to us? We can see here it is 66.6 degrees Celsius. Again we can see where is 60. Yes, this is the line which correspond to 60, and this is the line which is correspond to the 70, and we know that our desired temperature is between them, which is 66. So might be I would like to trace a point like here, which is almost, I will say, 66. Now another information regarding temperature is provided to us, the throttle inlet temperature. We know that the procedure is that from evaporator the refrigerant will enter into the compressor, from compressor it will exit into the condenser, it is going to enter into the throttle. So throttle again will return, the refrigerant will enter into the evaporator finally. So here throttle inlet temperature is given, which is 36 degrees Celsius, and normally for example 36, we know that this is 30 degree isothermal line, then it moves horizontally like that. Once it touches saturated liquid point, it will move upward vertically around like that. So this is 30 degree. Similar pattern will followed by 40 degree isothermal line. It should move like that, then inside the region like that, then when touch this saturated liquid portion, it will move upward like that. But our desired temperature that we need to trace is correspond to 36. So now let's trace a 36, and I think this is a 40, 30, so might be it is somewhere around here, 36. So since we need to trace 36 on the condenser or throttle inlet, we know that condenser exit corresponds to the throttle inlet. So trace a vertical line correspond to the 36, and we are here. So now we also have traced a point for 36 as well. And since we know that this is a throttling process, so throttling process means during throttling enthalpy does not change. Since it's a pressure enthalpy diagram, and vertical line will indicate that a line which is correspond to constant enthalpy in the throttling valve. So we can also trace back that line down vertically up to this point. So now we have all the points that those are required to complete a diagram. So here from the evaporator it will and refrigerant will enter into the compressor. So no, we need a red line. So from the evaporator it is going to enter into the compressor, and from the compressor it is going to exit into the condenser. From the condenser, temperature will be reduced up to the point when it is going to enter into the throttle. So it is a throttling, and when throttling starts, it is again at the end it is going to enter into the evaporator, and then from the evaporator heat is exchanged and it will reach at that point, vertical line, it is entered into the compressor. So now this is how we can trace our point, and then we can trace a complete diagram. So now let's for example name them, and for example the point here, it is point 1. Yes, it is point 1. Here it from point 1 to point 2, this is entry is point 1 for the compressor, exit is the point 2 for the compressor, entry into the compressor, and from here point 3 is the entry into the throttling valve, and finally the exit from the throttling or inlet into the evaporator, which is point 4, and it is here. So we have traced all our complete lines. And now another important information, now we have traced our complete cycle, refrigeration cycle, in on a pH diagram. Other important information that we can find and that you need to know to calculate different you can say values using different formulas in your lab sheet, enthalpy values. Now we know that it's a pressure enthalpy diagram, for example, and at point 1 just trace a vertical line down up to this point, and then you can measure the enthalpy. For example, at this point, this it touches on the horizontal axis, which is between 360 and 340. So might be you can find H1 correspond to 350. Similarly, for point 2, again draw a vertical line until it is touching the this point. So this is your enthalpy value H2, and 3 and 4, since it is constant enthalpy process, so just draw a vertical line here, and we know that enthalpy value, which is very approximately close to 240 kilojoule per kilogram. So this is how you can find your enthalpy values. Another information that you need to know is to find the isentropic efficiency. We know that isentropic efficiency means once the refrigerant enters into the compressor, it should be compressed isentropically, and the isentropic lines, those are provided here. We can see these lines are can be traced something like that. Yes, these are. So we will trace a line correspond to the isothermal lines, isentropic lines by from here, which is the entry point to the compressor. So ideally it should follow the blue line which I just traced if it is compressed isentropically, but instead since process was not ideal, so it followed the other path from point 1 to point 2. So might be this new isentropic for example this point here might be, I name it, let's 2 bar 2 dash. So this is our isentropic point, and rather than following this path in the compressor, it followed another path which ended at point 2. So now again you can find the corresponding enthalpy values from here. We already know H1, and just trace a vertical line down here, and this line you can again find a enthalpy from here, which is might be very close to 375 or somewhere around that 375. So this new enthalpy values will help you to find your isentropic efficiency. So now this is the complete you can say trace of a refrigeration cycle that I have drawn using the data obtained from the lab. So I hope this method, this video will help you to trace your points and then finally submitting your reports. So good luck and see you next time.